Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to another quick tank review. This week we are looking at the E-100. This was my first tier 10 tank and I feel like I'm really going back to my roots by reviewing it. Now while this tank may not be the heaviest in the game, weighing 60 tons less than the Mouse, it packs a serious amount of armor and has a whopping great 15 centimeter gun attached to it, which usually allows it to overpower its enemies. If this sounds like the tank for you, stay tuned, I've got two lots of gameplay coming up for you. And if you have no interest in playing this tier 10 German behemoth, then I will let you know how to take them out effectively on the battlefield. This tank has the second highest hit points in the game at 2,700. That gives you nearly an extra half on most medium tanks. It means that when the going gets tough, you really can weather the storm for long enough, hopefully to be able to take out your opponents. Now the tank is very heavy, weighing in at 130 tons when it's fully equipped, with a very meaty engine propelling at around 1,200 horsepower. Nevertheless, this horsepower to ton ratio is below 10, meaning that the tank does have some issues with its mobility, but not at least with regards to its top speed, which is a very healthy 30 kilometers an hour. Now I say very healthy, and really that's because the other tier 10 German heavy tank, the Mouse, has a terrible 20 kilometers an hour top speed limit. This really is one of the key differences between the vehicles, the fact that the E-100 is able to get places so much faster than the Mouse, as well as having a fairly okay traverse speed at 22 degrees a second for a very heavy German vehicle. Now when you look at the armor profile, you really know where that extra weight has gone, and it's got 200 millimeters at the front, 120 at the side, and even the back is 150, with the turret 250 at the front, 150 at the side, and 150 at the rear. Let's just take a quick look into What Tank Viewer to have a look at this in some more detail. So here's our E-100. And the armor profile with a key at the bottom for you. So the thickest armor on the tank is the front of the turret, which is 250 millimeters thick. It's worth noting that the front is quite well angled, unlike the cheeks of a Mouse, which can help you to stop getting penetrated as easily in the front of your turret. I'd like to highlight, however, the turret ring, which is completely flat and 250 millimeters thick along the front, and as we can see, the side is angled, so if the E-100 is angling his turret at 45 degrees, and you have a precision shot and he's stationary, you could put it in here. There are 250 millimeters of spaced armor directly behind the gun on the E-100, dropping down tiers to 200 there, and 100 surrounding that. Now behind that spaced armor we can see there is still some rather thick stuff. 210 millimeters surrounding the gun there, but inside this circle it is 0 millimeters thick. So this means that if you're aiming at the 100 and for some reason you want to shoot it directly in the gun, which I don't really recommend because you can always probably hit the turret ring, then hitting it directly on, either here or here, will mean that you only need to get through 250 millimeters of spaced armor. So the side of the turret and the rear is 150 millimeters thick, apart from this pentagon in the middle, which is only 100. So if you're aiming at the E-100 in the back of the turret, this is a very easy place to penetrate it. Now there is a bar of armor on top of the E-100's turret, which is 150 millimeters thick. So if you get a chance, you can take advantage of this. Now to have a look at the hull armor. The upper plate is 200 millimeters thick, and unless you're shooting it from above, you've got very little chance of ever penetrating the upper plate on this tank. The lower plate is definitely your key to taking it out frontally. It's 150 millimeters thick, which makes it easily the thinnest armor that will be visible from the front. However, it is worth noting that it is very well angled, and if you try and penetrate it from this angle, unless you've got a very high penetration gun, you're going to fail. You want to try and get the E-100 as flush on as possible, and then penetrating here will quite often not only damage him, but also destroy his engine. The tracks on the E-100 are exceedingly large. I'm going to hide them to make this easier to see. But it's worth noting that they do count as 40 millimeters of armor on the E-100. Down the side of the E-100, we can see there is some very thick spaced armor. These parts here at the front are 200, and these side skirts are 60 millimeters thick. If you want to try and get through 60 millimeters of spaced armor, you are still going to have to get through 120 millimeters of side armor on the E-100. So you're best to probably aim below this spaced armor and to shoot through the tracks which is thinner, and you've also got a chance of detracking him at the same time. Now, the rear armor on the E-100 is surprising. It is 150 millimeters on the hull, and it is quite well angled. What this means is that when you're tanking in the E-100, if the enemy does actually manage to get to your side, angle the rear of your tank as well. Do everything that you can to avoid them having a flush, flat shot on your hull armor. The rear is nearly as good as the front, so don't panic and just keep it angled. Unfortunately for the E-100, from above, it's not safe from artillery. There's 65mm on top of the turret and 40mm on top of the hull. So don't think for 1 second that just because your tank weighs for 130 tons, if the artillery do manage to hit the top of your tank, you're gonna lose a hell of a lot of your hit points. And you're a very large and sometimes slow target for them, and they will target you. So the E-100 has a choice of two guns. It can either use 128mm, which you used on the E-75, or you can choose to use the rather unique 150mm. I say it's a unique because it's the highest alpha damage on any of the heavy tanks. And that can be very satisfying because you have a fully traversable turret, and that can be very satisfying because it will allow you to out-trade your opponents. So just to compare the guns quickly, you fire 3 rounds a minute in the E-100. Now that's not bad. It may not be Object 268 standard, but as you can see here, I'm showing you the T10 E4 gun. You practically have the same rate of fire as a Tier 10 tank destroyer, and remarkably the same aim time too at 2.9. Now the accuracy on the gun isn't brilliant, it's 0.4, but the accuracy on the 128 is barely any better at 0.38. In fact, when we look at this 128mm when it's mounted on the E-75, it becomes very apparent that you only get a marginal rate of fire boost to the gun and nothing else. This means that, in my opinion, if you want to use the 128mm on this tank, you're probably better to stay with the E-75. The E-100 needs the extra DPM, the extra alpha damage of the 150mm, and also the flexibility to fire HE ammunition. But if you thought it was all good news for the 150mm, you'll be very disappointed with the penetration of it. It's 235, making it the lowest penetration of any of the heavy tanks. And just thinking about it for a second, I believe that's the lowest penetration on any Tier 10 tank in the game with its AP rounds. You're going to be sporting, on average, 15mm less penetration than, for example, the IS-7, and 23mm less than tanks such as the T10E5, the FE215B, or the IS-4. What this means is that you generally do have to get the side or the rear of the enemy tank to be able to penetrate them, unless they're giving you one of their weak points. Now the way to compensate for this is to fire heat ammunition. Now the heat rounds will cost you over 4 times as much, but they will have 334mm of penetration. Alternatively, if you don't want to fire heat, but you still want to do damage to a very thickly armored opponent, then you can fire HE rounds, which due to the large caliber nature of this gun have 85mm of penetration. And even if you fail to penetrate, you will still do rather large amounts of splash damage. Depending on the thickness of the enemy tank, you're likely to do about 300 to an E-100 as an example if you shoot him in the frontal hull armor or on the tracks, going up to about 400 to 500 damage per shot on a medium tank. And if you hit a very lightly armored tank in the side or the rear, or even some in the front such as the Batchat, you're going to be doing 950 alpha damage, as well as probably taking out most of their modules. And this is one of the keys in the E-100, knowing which ammunition you should use against the target. And thankfully, the E-100 can carry 50 rounds in its 150mm, which is enough to kill the enemy team probably 2 times over, even if they're all Tier 10. Now the rest of the stats on the tank are fairly standard. It has a kind of healthy turret traverse speed of 20 degrees a second and a standard 400 meters view range. Now one thing I'd just like to highlight quickly that's important on the E-100 is one of your driver skills. With frontal transmission, you're very likely to get set on fire if you're penetrated multiple times in the lower front hull of your tank. So I strongly recommend that you use preventive maintenance on your driver as one of the perks. Now remember, this won't work at all until it gets to 100%, so don't waste your time otherwise. Anyway, that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. So here we go. I'm defending Karelia in a very nice matchup indeed. The enemy have only got 3 Tier 10s, and then they've only got 4 Tier 9s after that, meaning that half of the enemy team are Tier 8. Now obviously, With the nature of armor that it only works if they fail to penetrate you, the E-100 does exceedingly well against lower tiered vehicles. And that's because tanks such as the T-69 literally can't penetrate you nearly anywhere unless they fire heat rounds. And wow, looks like our artillery went into a fairly standard position, and a great job by the enemy artillery to counter battery that GW Tiger within literally the first 30 seconds of the game before he even fired. Well played to him. So back to what I was saying about the fact that the T-69 just can't penetrate me unless he fires premium ammunition, and even then, it's very, very hard for him too. The Tiger 2, the T-32, the KV-4, the IS-3, these are all Tier 8 tanks that have about 225mm of penetration and less. And that is the sweet spot for the E-100. As soon as the tanks start to get up to the IS-8 as an example, they've got practically a Tier 10 gun on an IS-8 with 250, and that's where it can start to be a bit more of a challenge for you unless you angle your armor well. So I'm just hoping that this IS-8 is foolish enough to think that he is against two Tier 8 heavy tanks. I'm readying up the gun as we come round the corner, and that the IS-3 just lost half of his hit points. And that was a very nearly completely average roll. 749, and half of the hit points gone from the IS-3. Now our rate of fire is not terrible. We're quickly ready to put in the finishing shot into him. And now I pull back because I'm very worried about the enemy artillery firing a shot into us. But seeing that two of my Tier 8s are advancing, I feel like I need to help them out. That sounded like it was an artillery shell. At the time, I believe I thought, okay, now here's something very important I'm doing. I'm angling my turret armor, locking in my turret at 45 degrees to try and avoid taking damage from anyone on the ridgeline. And there's a T-69. Goodbye to your head, little T-69. I totally forgot that that had happened. Oh my word. Wow. Yep, and that's one of the advantages of having a very high caliber gun. When you do put a shell into an enemy's ammo rack, then generally they're going to blow up. Now hopefully you guys are seeing, now this is something very important I'm doing. I'm advancing at him with my turret angled. I'm just going to pause this because this is a very important point of the E-100. When you're advancing at enemy tanks, you never want to have your turret pointing directly at them, because it makes your turret armor very flat and easily penetrable, especially when I'm going down slope, which means that the natural angling on my turret armor will make it so it's even flatter for him. So whenever you're advancing at enemy tanks, you need to angle your turret. Point your turret to the side, and then hold down your right mouse button if you need to look elsewhere. That will lock your turret in place and allow you to keep it as well angled as possible to avoid fire. Of course, because of the alpha damage of the E-100, that means that you have to aim at the enemy less frequently. And we can see as soon as I turned my turret directly to an opponent there, they took a shot at me. So it's very likely that they were waiting to shoot me until I turned my turret towards him. Now I shoot the IS-8 there. Unfortunately, we track him. And I tried to ram him, but I get stuck. So an IS-3 just shot my gun. But we do not need to be accurate at this kind of close quarters combat. So I'm angling my turret to the side here. He bounces off it, and I ram him to death. And you can do that very effectively in the E-100 because it weighs so much. You can literally shunt people to death, and we did it for 148 damage there on the IS-8. But again, I would like to highlight how important it is between your shots to angle your turret armor. I'm almost certain that if I hadn't there, the IS-8 would have penetrated me again. So, this game is developing very rapidly indeed. The enemies have breached through that western flank, and I've got 2 tank destroyers above me, but I can't really worry about the tank destroyers too much. Because unless I get into a position to help out my team, they will lose that flank. Thankfully, my alpha damage there kicks in. We roll for nearly 700, almost one-shotting that tier 8 tank destroyer. So one of the best things about the E-100 is how thick the armor is, meaning that at ranges you can be ultra effective. I'd just like to pause for another second here to say that this Tiger II has a serious job on his hands. He has to deal with a tier 8 tank destroyer and a tier 9 turreted artillery. More on that later. So this is another important aspect of the E-100, side scraping. As your hull armor on the lower plate is the weakest, what that means is that you need to try and hide it. If you can manage to find yourself a rock or a wall, a building, anything, get in on it, angle your armor. This is probably slightly over-angled. I would recommend maybe slightly less angling, so it'd probably be more like this. Which means that your armor is so much more effective when it's angled, and it's very unlikely that any enemy tank will be able to penetrate me from this range unless they shoot me probably here in the flat side of my turret. So what you've always got to be thinking in this tank is that when you're pointing your gun at the opponents, that there's a chance they can penetrate them. And so now you see me angling my turret armor perfectly against the opponents, and it is very unlikely that any of those vehicles is able to get me. There we can see a shot from a tier 9 Soviet heavy tank, the IS-7, goes into my tracks, and my Jagdpanzer E-100 is able to finish him off. So, I unfortunately only did track damage to the enemy IS-3. But here we have a shot from the E-75, and oh, I donk it! What a terrible shot by me. And it looks like now that I have loaded heat ammunition. Ironically, the first heat shell that I fire is the one that misses. So we're trying to feather out a shot on the enemy IS-3 there. We're unable to get one. I'd like to give a preemptive shout out to that Tiger II who did manage to kill that tier 8 tank destroyer and the artillery. So now we're shooting at a mouse. We don't have a shot on him. Now we do. And that's where your heat rounds are very effective. Even when I have the side of his turret flush, it's still very unlikely that I'm going to be able to penetrate him with AP ammunition, simply because the mouse's armor is so darn thick. Luckily for us, we're able to penetrate 2 important shells on their German heavy tanks, shaving off a large amount of their hit points. So even though there's a T-32 trying to shoot me, I'm not really worried about him. We've loaded AP ammunition again because I feel like the game is under control now. And the T-32 is more or less unable to penetrate me, even if he shoots me in the lower plate at the perfect angle for him. Now this T-32 is trying to run away from me. I'm not too bothered about him though. I'm more interested in not getting shot by the mouse, but it looks like actually I was focused on the T-32. I'm still worried about that mouse. He's only got 1% hit points left, so I'm not too worried about him. But he does put in a good shot into the back of my turret there. Nevertheless, we managed to come around the corner and roll for 813 against that T-32. The mouse puts in another good shot into us. But thankfully, I've got so many hit points that I'm not too concerned about it. So the T-32 more or less had the perfect angle on our side armor there. However, he was unable to get through the 40mm of track armor and the 120mm of side armor behind that. And we finish him off. 2 hitting him with a nice second roll. And giving us the top gun already. So now I'm firing HE ammunition. Why? Because there's a mouse. All I have to do is sneeze my HE shell anywhere near the mouse, and I will be able to kill him. We don't even have to aim at his weak point. We're guaranteed to do 28 damage to any tank in the game with our HE rounds. Foolishly though, I have loaded another HE round. Now that's a mistake. When you're engaging a Tiger II, you want to fire AP ammunition. Nevertheless, I have my HE round loaded. We fire one into his tracks and set him on fire. It's just going to pause that there for a second. We fired an HE round into the tracks of a fairly heavily armoured Tiger II. It did 359 damage to him, tracked him, and also damaged his engine to set him on fire. This gives you an idea of the effectiveness of the HE ammunition with this high caliber 150mm at taking out very heavily armoured targets, well, at least taking them out when they've got very low hit points left, such as the mouse. And it is also very effective at long-range engagements where you simply want to do some kind of damage to the enemy and hopefully take none in return. We got pretty lucky there with the fire at the end on the Tiger II, although I feel that with 25 seconds left I would have been able to reload and take him out. So hopefully this gave you a taste of what E-100 gameplay is like. We pushed aggressively down one flank, took out all the opponents that were over there, got a little bit of luck with the ammo rack, but it probably wouldn't have mattered, it just speeded up the engagement. Then we proceeded to make our way across the middle of the map to be able to provide fire support to one of the flanks that was getting overwhelmed, ending with a killing spree and finishing off the game in style. Let's take a quick look at the post-game stats before we get stuck into some more gameplay. So we finished picking up a Radley Walters at the end of the game for killing over half of the enemy team, the steel wall, and unsurprisingly a high caliber medal. We fired 16, of which we hit 15, and 15 of those penetrated. We took 17 hits that game, of which 4,000 was blocked by our very thick armor, with 5,700 potential damage received and still having over 1,000 hit points, which is a third of our health. This really showcased what the all-round armor of the E-100 is capable of. So we made 105,000 credits this game. The repair on the tank was nearly 19,000, and the ammunition resupply was nearly 32. So even though we fired a couple of heat rounds in the middle, we still made 56,000 credits profit, which highlights that with careful use of your premium ammunition, it doesn't have to cost you anything. In fact, it's going to make you money. I'd like to give a shout out to this Tiger II. He played a fantastic role in the game as well. Even though he was in a tier 10 matchup, he managed to pick up 3 kills. If he hadn't killed that artillery, I would have been a sitting duck in the middle of the field. And also that tier 8 tank destroyer could have got himself into a position to be able to shoot me, and I would have been unable to return fire on him. Thank you, Sopel, for your role in the game. I thought that this replay really summed up the all-round nature of the E-100, and it highlighted the pivotal role that the tank can have in the game. Anyway, let's take a look at some more gameplay. So now we're playing on Cliff, and this is a more standard kind of matchup for the E-100. The enemies have actually got another tier 10 tank, and it is a Waffenträger Alpha E-100. This is patch 9.1, so this tank is still absolutely redonkulous with its 128mm. So, this is a bit cheeky. The enemies have also got an extra tier 8 scout tank. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, this matchup was fairly interesting. And also, although I've got the statistics off at the moment, I noticed that this was a 40%er, I believe. So, thankfully, there's no artillery on the enemy team. So we take a shot at the enemy 1390. We're trying to stop him from getting up into an early position. And sometimes the 150mm will troll you. We hit him smack on, but we only did tracking damage. And he just went, I'll use a small repair kit or a large repair kit, and he's back, motoring his way up the field. So apart from the very challenging matchup that we have, what am I thinking at the moment? Well, those 1390s are going to dominate the hill and get excellent spotting out. What that means is that it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to remain hidden at the back here. And so it's probably best to push in and get in on the corner. So those 1390s, if I went down the east, would be able to spot me. And this is the old version of the map. I really don't like the look of going against the enemy tanks to the east. With those 1390s above, they're able to shoot down on those IS-8s, and on me, it's going to be a nightmare. So I decided that it was more important for me to take up a position that you probably couldn't go into if there were artillery on the enemy team. Now, if there were artillery here, he would splash me over and over and over again, slowly taking me out. But because there are no artillery, this position is very viable indeed. Generally, heavy tanks will go round the east of this map if they wish to avoid the artillery. I popped around the corner there to take a snapshot at the Waffenträger auf E-100. We won't know if that blind shot went in. But there's a more important target right now. A Jagdtiger. I'm trying to get into position to shoot him in the back. And a nice roll there for 783 damage. Wow, that Waffenträger auf Panzer IV really wanted to get the kill on that Object 140. And he takes out one of our most important vehicles. So the enemy are putting an immense amount of pressure on us here. The enemy Waffenträger auf E-100 is trying to engage me. I'm not interested in him right now. I want to try and stop him from rushing me, but I really want to take out the medium tanks first. We put in a good shot into the Object 140. The enemy Waffenträger auf Panzer IV is putting some pressure up over on the ridgeline. And this is a very stressful situation for the E-100. Thankfully, the Object 140 just got taken out by an AMX 1390. Great job by him. It was a good thing we put in that meaty shell into him and left him on very low health. I cannot believe, looking back on this game, that Waffenträger auf Panzer IV has managed to pick up 3 kills and have so much of his hit points remaining. What a ballsy play by that guy. But he got a little too cheeky. We put in a good shot into him, and we're reloading an HE round now. We bounce a shot from him. He got a little too confident, and our 1390 down at the bottom manages to take him out. This is an HE round. We put it into the turret of the Waffenträger auf E-100, and now I'm trying to angle my armor as much as I can. And thankfully, the WZ-132 behind me takes out the Waffenträger auf E-100. Now, just to highlight the HE round that I fired there, it did 936 damage to that lightly armored German tank destroyer. And that's slightly below average. The average damage that it would do would be 950. And that meant that we got the tank low enough, and he was probably very surprised. He thought, I can go in and take a shot and I'll still have 500 hit points left. No, not with the HE penetration. That allowed the WZ-132 to support me and take him out before I would have lost the majority of my hit points. Then we fired another HE round at the T10 E5, which did 316 damage. But now we've loaded AP again. Very stressful shot here. Oh, I should have taken it. The 1390 has managed to get behind the building. That's not good for us. This game was... There's a large amount of pressure on me. I felt like I was always surrounded. Luckily, we managed to shut down that 1390 before he can change flanks. And the T10 E5 is trying to go deep around us now. Oh, yes. 886 damage to the T-125, setting him on fire, and his fire extinguisher has been used. He got a little bit too confident there. And this is where the E-100 is strong. If it can manage to get itself into a position with its armor angled, not getting flanked, it can just be an absolute force on the battlefield. I'm pretty much slowing down the entire enemy advance right now, along with this Lerva. But you got to see there that the AP ammunition was unable to go through the front of that IS-8. Most of the other Tier 10 tanks would have probably been able to penetrate him. And so I have loaded a heat round, because I really want to get this guy out. We can see where the enemy E-100 Jagdpanzer is now. We're going to try and put a shot into him. Brilliant. We force him off the cliff. Now he's lost his vantage point. It's a very good thing that we didn't try and push around the east of the cliff there. This is the 9.1 version of the game. And there haven't been the changes which allow you to probably be more aggressive and to advance into positions. At least you've got more cover. Now he was basically thinking that he could camp there and wait for, I guess, myself and others to push round the corner. And that hasn't happened for him. The E-100's alpha damage really is such a large threat. And interestingly, that T-125 managed to sneak all the way around back. I thought he was still there, but no. He proceeded to make his way all the way round back. But unfortunately for him, his epic mission ended a bit abruptly at the hands of a Tier 10 British tank destroyer. Now we looped in a good shot there into the IS-3, who lost half of his hit points. I know there's a 1390 above me, but there's very little that I can do about him. I'm more worried about the enemy E-100 Jagdpanzer getting a good shot into us. So I turn now and I aim for the enemy 1390. He's not there, so we're going to go for the enemy Jagdpanzer E-100, and we have a lovely shot into his side, penetrating the AP round and increasing the total that we did to that Tier 10 German tank destroyer to nearly 1,400. So right now this game is looking very secure indeed. The enemy 1390 up on the hill will be more or less useless, and I don't really have to worry about him at all. He has to fire APCR rounds at me to penetrate me, and so that allows us to come around the corner and pick up a meaty shot into the IS-3. I proceed forward to try and ram the tank, which we do. That's so satisfying to kill tanks with very low hit points by ramming. Now we go hunting for the 1390. I'm just going to speed up the game here. And I'm not sure if we actually managed to pick up the kill on the 1390 or not. Nope. He caps, and the little French scout manages to live to see another day. So this replay really highlighted the staying power of the E-100. The fact that if it manages to get itself into position and avoids being outflanked, it's nigh on impossible to take out unless you rush it in an organized fashion. I got to show you a bit more of the careful use of ammunition that you can have, and just how fantastic the alpha damage is on this 150mm that can allow you to outtrade your opponents. So let's just take a quick look at some more post-game stats. So this was another very meaty round for the vehicle, 102,000 credits received, which gives us 72,000 credits profit. We didn't get a plethora of medals here, but we still got the high caliber as we picked up nearly 8,000 damage. Now we fired 14, of which we hit 13, and 12 of those penetrated. We took less hits this game, 6 hits received, of which half penetrated, but that still gives us 2000 damage blocked by armor, and enough potential damage received to kill most other tanks. This German Tier 10 heavy tank is a surprisingly well-rounded vehicle. It has enough armor, if well used, to bounce any tank in the game, and a gun that can equally shave off half the health of tanks that it can meet and pose a serious threat to the same tier. Careful use of the different ammunition types in the vehicle can allow it to perform effectively against anything it can meet, and still allow you to have a healthy amount of profit at the end of the game. Now, this was the first Tier 10 tank I ever got, and so my stats are definitely better since I started replaying it recently than when I first got it. But honestly, going back to my roots and playing this tank more has been one of the most enjoyable experiences that I've had in World of Tanks in a while. I just want to quickly mention some of the downsides to this vehicle. Since the introduction of tanks such as the FV215B183 and the Waffenträger E-100, there are vehicles that can simply devastate you. If you get yourself into a tricky situation, a Waffenträger E-100 can kill you in one clip. And against a skilled player, there's very little that you could do about it. Tanks such as the FV215B, thankfully this patch have been nerfed, and it's now very unlikely that he's going to be able to penetrate his Hesh ammunition unless you give him a flush shot into your side or rear. And that means that, in my opinion, there's never been a better time than to bring out your E-100 and have a hell of a lot of fun in the game. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this tank review. If you did, or maybe it was just useful to you, please do consider rating the video down below. It really helps the channel out. And let me know in the comments if you think that there's anything that I've missed. Do you think I've been too optimistic or too pessimistic about the E-100? Let me know what you think. Also, if you want to see some more gameplay in this German behemoth, you want to click this video up here and it will take you through to satisfy your need to see this German tank in action. Anyway guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.